Yeah. So, of course, what was happening there is that was the voting, and the two people going for the new mayor position was the DA's Retief Odendaal up against Council Chief Whip Wandisile Jigega. Apparently what happened is that that box was completely ripped up. So pretty chaotic in Nelson Mandela Bay. And let's at this point bring in political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. Of course, he's also the host of On the Spot, which is on Sundays here on eNCA. So, Lukhona, we were going to talk about load shedding and Eskom. We are. But let's just first deal with what's going on in Nelson Mandela Bay. Quite sad. Everyone was dressed up in their finery for Heritage Day, and it just became an absolute crazy scene of chaos. Do you think that this is just a symptom of the inherent instability that is going to happen with hung councils, and we need to perhaps find a better way?
Well, Sally, good evening, and good evening to our viewers at eNCA. Look, they were risking their garments, the people who went, to that council meeting clad so beautifully, because that council itself has a history of such conduct when issues are so heated. You will remember that someone has actually faced arrest and imprisonment in Andile Lungisa for, similar violent acts that took place in the council chambers some years back during those coalition arrangements that descended into chaos in the Nelson Mandela Bay metropolitan. Sally, I think we need to be very serious about the need to legislate how we do coalition building, how we hold these coalitions accountable, because the problem right now is that they belong solely to the whims of individuals and political parties. There's no sense of institutionalization of these coalitions. There's no sense of how you can think of these coalitions in more stable forms that are institutionalized, maybe where you may need to have a closed window period after a coalition government has been put up, that it must govern for X amount of time before a motion can be moved to reconstitute or reconsider that coalition. We really have to spend a bit of time and work around that, and I think it's for legislators, especially in the National Assembly, to think about this, particularly because it's becoming evidently clear that in 2024 we will have more coalitions in some provinces and even possibly at the national level.
Yeah, and this is just the latest in series of disruptive moments at local government level. Of course, we've also heard Colleen Makubela of COPE saying, no, I haven't been suspended. And I mean, there are so many different things to touch on. But let's put that aside for now. And Eugene Johnson, we see her on the wall. She is definitely no longer on the political scene as mayor in Nelson Mandela Bay anymore. But that pales into insignificance when we consider the big problem that we are all seized with, and that is the problem of our intermittent power supply. We know that the cabinet has been meeting today. We heard former President Thabo Mbeki speaking at UNISA, and he took a bit of a swing at the current and previous management at Eskom, and he said something to the effect of, oh, well, the politicians, they have to make those big decisions, but actually Eskom, the management, are the ones who have to make the decisions about the right boilers, etc., etc. He didn't go back to the point that he's already acknowledged that in 2007, when government was asked by Eskom to invest in new power, government said no. He's on record saying he got that wrong. Do you think that his input is important, or is this just politicking, and voices like that we should sort of hear but perhaps not take too much notice of?
Well, Sally, those sentiments shared by former President Thabo Mbeki do not help us solve the problem that we are faced with. What we need now to be seized with are ideas of how do we get out of this mess. It's not just his government necessarily declining that. We know that then they chose arms, now known as the arms deal, over energy security for the country. It was a short-sighted decision. Of course, they were already probably beholden to various contracts in the arms deal and so on. But more important is that notorious relationship between Chancellor House and Hitachi, because part of the problems that are really giving us serious problems, particularly in the new plants, Medupi and Kusile, is that collusive, corrupt relationship between the investment arm of the African National Congress and Hitachi. Some engineers at Eskom already at the time were saying that Hitachi was installing subpar boilers that were leaking, and it was becoming more expensive to repair them than what it cost to install them. So the reality here is that we have a political problem, and until you get probably some political change, there will be no willingness to do anything about the energy crisis. Prof. Makgoba, who has been acting, well, he is chairperson of the board. Let's not say he has been acting, but when he was appointed there, it was understood that it would be an interim arrangement. And this was in January 2020. The president is on record at the Kimberley January 8 statement event saying that he would soon appoint a reconfigured Eskom board. And guess what, Sally? The Eskom board has simply depleted over time. I think something I read was to the effect that there are only about now 4 non-executive board members at Eskom, and none of them is an engineer, none of them is a chartered accountant. I'm not really sure what the governance model at Eskom is hoped it can achieve when it lacks the expertise, when it lacks the know-how. And then, of course, lastly, Sally, you've got a problem of the value chain of accountability at Eskom, where the CEO, the board chairperson, the minister responsible for Eskom, and the president, none of them is an engineer. And what now they've been doing is to try and round up engineers at Eskom to give them reports. But I'm also told by some engineers at Eskom that, because they do not appreciate the extent of the information before them, they are unable to take the correct decisions. And therefore, they simply throw out the reports and decide to make political decisions. And we've seen these political decisions. We've seen Eskom suspending load shedding in some instances for political events or for funerals and so on. So you can then rest assured, Sally, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that this current political leadership can achieve, because they have intervened so many times. Chief Reconfiguration Officer in Freeman Nomvalo appointed, and energy experts appointed, international experts appointed. Where are the reports? Interministerial task teams, a war room chaired by the Deputy President of South Africa. What have all these interventions been for? It's quite demonstrable that they are pretending to be doing something, but they are actually appointing people who do not understand Eskom, who cannot turn around Eskom, and you need a bit of leadership and skills. And I think, Sally, for me, lastly, the lesson here is that we've got to really, as South Africans, start asking about the quality of the politicians that we have who are leading this country.
Yeah, it's really interesting because in a way, you actually did back up what Thabo Mbeki said about problems with leadership. And he said Eskom shouldn't be led by politicians and by accountants. Eskom needs to be led by engineers and economists. And he's quite right, I suppose, in that sense. But if you speak to someone like Mark Swilling, and he really made so much sense, he's with the National Planning Commission, and he is someone who understands those big picture. You're so right that, if corruption comes through the door and you don't have your engineers and your people who actually understand the business, it's very easy to be hoodwinked. But it seems to be, from what Mark Swilling was saying, is that the right moves are now being made, but it's too slow. Are you concerned that, in fact, wrong decisions are still being made?
I am concerned, Sally, because there's no transparency at Eskom. There's no transparency in terms of how their maintenance plans are rolled out. There's no transparency in terms of who is doing maintenance plans. I'll give you a quick example. When I was home in December last year, there had been a flood at my village, and we needed our electricity restored because one of the power lines had actually, snapped. And you know, there was nobody coming to fix, made a few phone calls. Eventually, people came to fix the power lines. I spoke to them and I said, guys, where were you over the last few days? They said, no. Some of us wanted to work, but we had to chill at our B&Bs because there is a new overtime policy that bars us from doing work during the weekend. So even if you want to work, sometimes you are told no, to just sit there at home or sit at your hotel and you will work on the normal working hours. That delays service delivery. That delays, you know, the ability of ESCOM to get work done. This was from the people who work at ESCOM. I'm not making it up. So the point really, Sally, is that we need something more than just cosmetic changes to happen. We need something significant to shift at ESCOM. And I think more than anything, what has happened at ESCOM is that there is no collegiality. I don't think there is respect of the CEO. I don't think the CEO has a degree of authority over the people that he leads. And as a result, there is no team and collective effort that is taking place within ESCOM. And therefore, there is much room, whether it's for sabotage, whether it is for corruption, to come through the door in an environment like that where people are not working as a team, they are pulling in different directions. But I think it's high time that we demanded serious transparency from ESCOM. Who are the service providers? What are they doing? What is the rate of the maintenance? And I mean, there are clearly poor engineering decisions that are being taken at ESCOM. I mean, you can't have units that come back from maintenance and then they are signed off as having, you know, been maintained to the levels required, and then the next few days they are tripping. It means that there's shoddy workmanship that is happening there. Things are being commissioned to come back online when they are not ready to be online, and then when they crash the next time, they probably do so and create much greater damage.
Yeah, and your point is well made. Transparency is absolutely crucial in this, so we can really understand some of the reasoning behind the decisions and point out if they're the wrong decisions. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That, of course, is political analyst, host of On the Spot here on eNCA, Lukhona Mnguni.